Good morning, Boker Tov, buenos dias, sabah al-khair. This is Shana Fold here with the Israel Daily News Podcast. I'm here to give you the headlines so you can get caught up quickly. You're listening, so you're already on top of your game. Survive and thrive, people. Knowledge is the best weapon. Today is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. Let's get to the news. The UN is siding with Israel. If you remember, Prime Minister Netanyahu gave an impressive presentation in 2018 claiming that Iran was creating nuclear weapons. He even had a map and pointed out the location. Well, the UN has followed up on that report and says Iran's explanation for the presence of nuclear material at an undeclared site was not credible and that the country would need a full and prompt explanation regarding the presence of uranium particles at the location. That was for the 2018 General Assembly. Yesterday, the Knesset voted 37-0 in favor of a bill that would turn two tourism hotspots, the Red Sea resort city of Eilat and a hotel zone near the Dead Sea, into special tourist islands, making them exempt from some coronavirus restrictions. Both areas, which heavily depend on tourism, have seen unemployment skyrocket as hotels shut down during the nationwide lockdown. Unemployment in Eilat remains over 40%, well above the national average. The bill, which would also let the government allow restaurants and tourist attractions to reopen, needs to go through two more readings before being passed into law. Entry into these special green tourist islands will be dependent on visitors showing that they've tested negative for the coronavirus in the last 48 hours. The Israeli Health Ministry announced a new plan to bring more students back to in-person school. The proposal is waiting on confirmation from the ministers in the coronavirus cabinet, and it calls for students in first and second grade to study in full-size classrooms for 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. The proposal also increases the number of days that third and fourth graders go to school, although they will remain in capsules of only 20 students. Teachers will be allowed to switch between a maximum of 4 classes, putting them in contact with only around 80 students. The schools will also open more areas within the school building for teachers to congregate, so to prevent overcrowding. This past week, the world lost Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Sacks was a great leader, scholar, and writer, as well as the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. He died on Saturday at 72 years old from cancer. Rabbi Sacks had the amazing ability to bring Torah into everyday life. I myself read his works each weekend to learn about being a better person and about being a leader. That book is called Lessons in Leadership. It's really a good one. I wanted to write a report specifically talking about how Sacks was a staunch supporter of Israel. This is the Israel Daily News Podcast. So I got on a call with his staff member, Dan Sacker, to ask some questions about Sacks' legacy. Sacker worked for the rabbi for 10 years, helping him deal with press and get the message out using technology, which Sacker says the rabbi was a big fan of using. Rabbi Sacks put out a new book called Morality in September, just a few months ago. And according to his team, despite the cancer, it didn't slow him down until the very last few weeks of his life. Sacks had been planning a book tour to Israel, but COVID-19 made that impossible. The rabbi has been honored by every major university in Israel with an honorary degree. That includes the Technion, Tel Aviv University, Bar Ilan, and he was supposed to be receiving one from the Hebrew University. During an AIPAC event, Sacks delivered a speech that was viewed more than 150,000 times on YouTube in 2013. He said it plainly: AntiZionism is the new anti-Semitism. The rabbi's 3 brothers all live in Israel, and he visited regularly. His staff says his love for the country and his defense of Israel was incredibly well known. He was outspoken and defended Israel during the Second Intifada, taking to the BBC network and speaking on television whenever he could. Sacker said he acted as an ambassador. Sacks' office doesn't know what they are going to be doing next, But currently, they're dealing with an outpouring of condolence letters from around the globe, starting with Prime Minister Netanyahu all the way to the Prime Minister of Australia. Now we're going to hear from Sacker, who speaks eloquently about Rabbi Sacks. Let's have Dan Sacker come on the show. So, what were the last few weeks like while you were working together?
It was an honour of a lifetime to work for Rabbi Sacks for nearly 10 years. Every day was a blessing. Every conversation I had gave new insights into something. There was never a moment where he wasn't pushing us as a team or challenging us or pushing himself or challenging himself. You know, he thought and walked quicker than anyone I've ever met. And just to try and keep up was a daily challenge, but it was a daily honour. And even sort of right up until the last few weeks, we were having conversations about how do we inspire the next generation of Jews? How do we, what should we be doing? Where are the holes in Jewish philosophy, in moral philosophy? What were the next challenges? He wrote a book called Future Tense, because he always had one eye on the future. For him, he wanted to make sure that Judaism wasn't a burden, but was a badge of honour to wear. And it's a tragedy that he's gone, but what he's left us with is that sense of challenge, that sense of determination to push, to always do more, to always seek more, to be better people tomorrow than we are today, and to be Jews who really are proud of our Yiddishkeit and proud of what our contribution can be to society.
You speak so beautifully on this, Dan. You say that Rabbi Sacks was a special man, a giant of his generation. What makes you say that? Who can you compare him to throughout history?
To me, Rabbi Sacks was an absolute giant of his generation. He was someone who transcended boundaries. He was a phenomenal spiritual leader, deeply knowledgeable about Jewish text, Jewish heritage, Jewish history. But he was a prolific author, a moral philosopher, a voice of moral clarity throughout the world, respected and revered by people from all faiths and of none. And he had this ability to speak beyond the community, to really be not just ambassador for Jews and Judaism to the world, but also to bring the very best ideas that existed in the world and make them relevant to Judaism. His whole philosophy was based around a Judaism engaged with the world, that what was rooted and deeply instilled in our most sacred texts would help us as Jews to live in the world, and all the things that were going in the world in terms of technology and advances and developments would help us have a better understanding of our faith. And for him, the ability to transcend those two worlds, both the secular and the religious, I think makes him an unrivaled giant of this generation.
What would you say is your fondest memory of Rabbi Sacks?
Fondest memory? I have so many, I don't even know where to begin. I remember the first week that I started working for him when he was still chief rabbi in 2011. And then he used to write a monthly column for the Times called the Credo column. And I remember in like sort of the first week that I was in the office, he sent me through a draft article to read and to comment on. And I went back and I sort of, being a new boy in the office, sort of very sheepishly just wrote back an email going, "Oh, it reads fantastic. I really like the flow of the argument. Everything's great. Shall I send it into the paper?" And I sent him back the email. And within about 10 seconds of pressing send, the phone went and it was Rabbi Sacks. And he said, "Dan," he said, "there's a million people in the world that I could send this article to get that kind of feedback. That's not your job." He's like, "Don't worry about it now. Send it. It's fine. I'll make some changes and we'll send it in." The next, a couple of weeks later, we were working on another article. Again, he sent it through to me to have a look at, and I thought, well, I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. So I sent him back some comments that were pretty harsh. First half of the article's great, second half loses the flow of argument. It's not a strong enough ending. Why haven't you included this? Or why haven't you included this? Why have you included this? I don't think that's the right word. Have you thought about this phrase? I sent him back a whole load of track changes on the article, and again, I sent it. 10 seconds later, the phone went, and I was like, I think I've probably gone too far in the opposite direction. And again, the phone went, and he said, Dan, better, but you can do better than that. And I think from that, what I learned and what he always said to us was we were empowered. He empowered us as his team, and he trusted us as his team to challenge him. It wasn't that there was obviously deference within the office. It was, you could feel the gravitas when you were around him, but he was someone who didn't want you just to sit there and say yes. He was someone who wanted you to push him, wanted him to push yourself, wanted him to really make sure that we were doing the very best that we could. And that sense of empowerment, that sense of I believe in you and I need you, was so unbelievably phenomenal of someone of his stature to be doing that for me.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your memory. We here at the Israel Daily News podcast and all of our listeners are sending you our greatest condolences. Now we turn our attention to Rabbi Avi Hill. He lives in England and grew up with Rabbi Sacks, who was a family friend. Rabbi Hill guides young people in England and in Tel Aviv. He's an inspiration and a spiritual leader. He'll also share his experience and memory of Rabbi Sacks. All right, Rabbi, thank you for coming to the show. It's a sad moment. However, it's a moment that we can take to really speak about somebody very powerful and someone who has done so much in the name of Israel and in the name of Jews everywhere.
Thanks so much, Shana, for being on your show. I'm excited to be part of it, even though a little bit sad.
What would you say made Rabbi Sacks stand out?
For me, his eloquence, honestly, his use of English, many rabbis are brilliant, but he was able to translate that brilliance into human language in a way that took the most complex ideas and made it so simple. If you listen to one of his talks, he was just asked the question, why do bad things happen? Which every rabbi's asked, and there's thousands of pages written on it. And he simply said, we don't know, we can't know, and God doesn't want us to know because he wants us to be in pain at the suffering of mankind. And it was so beautiful, so simple, but yet so deep. Many commentators spend hundreds of pages on that point, but he's able just to articulate it in a way of just absolute genius.
Rabbi Sacks was a close friend of yours, of your family, and even though I know that I come to this interview with a lot of energy, I know, and you have a lot of energy, I know that this is a very hard time for you, and it's really hard to say goodbye to a friend forget about how huge he is. Can you share a memory that you have of him that stands out to you?
Two kind of memories which I actually didn't see with my own eyes. It was through my father's eyes, because my father grew up, when he did his rabbinic semicha, he did it alongside Rabbi Sacks in Jews College. And I was taught when my father passed away just a few months ago, so I'm really feeling it even more right now. And I'm feeling now they've got a couple of friends they're going to be chatting away and learning together in Gan Eden right now. And I was told at the Shiva that by a dying Kodaim Binstock, that my dad and Jonathan Sacks would be the ones to go to the Rosh Hashiva and start quoting Plato and quoting Aristotle at the Rosh Hashiva. And they got this whole debate from connecting the Talmud to Plato and Aristotle. And that was kind of typical my father and typical Rabbi Sacks, number one. Number two, a memory just when I was brought up going to summer camps. My dad did outreach and did big summer and winter camps and did it alongside Jonathan Sacks, and they used to work together. And my dad, I remember telling me once that Rabbi Sacks, who I think is probably the greatest orator I've ever heard, before he used to speak publicly, he used to run off to the bathroom and make himself sick. He used to feel really sick. He used to get so nervous, he literally would vomit before many of his talks. And that stayed with me because it actually really inspired me, because I'm a speaker who also gets nervous before I speak. And I thought, you know what? You can do, if he can do it, and he's become the best in the world at it. And he had such nerves that it didn't stop him. He was sick, but then did the most incredible talk ever. I can as well. And it also showed me that I believe that his oratorical ability and his charisma wasn't egotistical at all. It was coming from a place of humility. He didn't actually want to be there. Every time he tried to stop taking the jobs that was offered to him, but then was forced into it because it wasn't about him. And that image of almost him being sick before his talks, as most people have no idea about. It's kind of like a family kind of piece of knowledge. That stick with me.
I think that stays with me because it just shows us that we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And we all get nervous. Now, I wanted to ask you just another question. I was trying to consolidate all of the Israel-focused things that I could find about Rabbi Sacks. And I found that all of his brothers live in Israel. He's been awarded an honorary degree from every top university in Israel. And he spoke at APAC, and his video got so many views when he said simply that today's modern anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. What do you think about that?
I think it's what the world needs to hear, and especially in the UK when we've been so hurt and burnt by what happened with the Labour Party, where you've got the leader of the Labour Party, a fierce anti-Zionist, but he believed you can be that, but it's got no issue to do with Judaism. And Jonathan Sacks, more than anyone, stood up high on the pedestal and said, no, you can't do that. There is no differentiation. What do you think Zion is? Zion is us. We are Zion. Our country is Israel. That you can't divorce and separate Israel from the Jewish people. We are one in the same. And he articulated that in such a profound way, as he always does. And that's one of the things that's going to be missing now. Who's going to be the one to stand up for the Jewish world when the world needs to hear it? Many rabbis, or what we call Noahide rabbis, they're in the ark and they look after their flock and they make sure they're okay, and they're scared to go out, and they feel if they go out they're going to be harmed, and it's going to somewhat dilute their own spirituality. But then there's other rabbis who are the Abraham rabbis, who are the ones who feel it's not enough if we're okay. We've got to help everyone else too. We need to be out. We need to get out. And Rabbi Sacks really epitomized that. And my question is, who's going to do it now with that gravitas, with that articulation? Please God, Hashem will help us find someone. I hope.
Thank you so much. Is there something that I'm missing?
Other than I just want to wish you, Shana, incredible success in your podcast. I hope you get millions of followers. Now you're on TikTok as well. So as I said to you, alongside your parents, I'm your biggest fan. So I really wish you tremendous Siyata Dishmaya, divine success, please God.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for being with us, Rabbi.
Always.
All right. Well, that's it for today's news. Today is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. Tel Aviv has a low of 18 degrees Celsius and a high of 26 degrees. That's 64 degrees Fahrenheit for the low, going up to 78 degrees for the high. Don't forget to subscribe to the Israel Daily News podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're hearing it from. I am everywhere. If you think this show brings value to you, if you think that it makes you more educated at the dinner table, then send over a donation. Today marks episode number 87, and we're getting close to number 100. I'd love to see some financial support from my listeners by the time we get there. There's a link in the show notes where you can find a link to send over a donation, and you can also find me on Patreon. I'll send you off today with a song called Schmoozin' by Kosha Dillz. It's a single that was released before the rest of the album, which just came out last week, called Nobody Cares Except You. You can catch Kosha Dillz on Money and Culture, which is going to air tomorrow night on Facebook. Have a great and productive day.
For bringing the party, who's in? For bringing the party, Jewish, the models and Barbie. I know you want me, I know you love me. Schmoozin' for bringing the party, who's in? For bringing the party, Jewish, the models and Barbie. Models and Barbie, I know you love me. Boy, chick, it's been years since my Bristol. Mr. Potato, West Style Brisket, Kanish flow for clump. Bagel up, futzing around, and you ain't never from on tour when I'm coming to town. Trave tuchis, ladies be under my gown. Yentas on young diff, and they running they mouth. Ask Sadie with a fat zuftig up in the house. This is for my baby mamas and my bubby who down. So I snore so loud when I sleep I can't. Dream about fresh sticks and a way to dance with a nice girl who catch and she like my pants. If she don't want my smack a bad, ask her friends. Kish from Candace in the kibitz room. Holy moly, shamoli, she looking for a shit soon. But I'm straight with sugar now, schwitzing like I'm in a June. Mentions really cool. Yentas in the house, yo, I'm feeling you. Who's in for bringing the party? Who's in for bringing the party? Jewish, the models and Barbie. I know you want me, I know you love me. Schmoozin' for bringing the party. Who's in for bringing the party? Jewish, the models and Barbie. Bottles of bubbly, I know you love me. Out to Cocker to a Buster. Cherished from the fact I'll probably have to meet the mother. Waiting for the chullin' of life. Enough chutzpah so the chullin' is tight. Chullin' your wife, I stay grinding. You know, fuck copter in the brain. Make my pit stop, shape my eyes in insane Yiddish flow. I'm a hustler, bubbler with brains. Rap like this, you'll never have a crap job to maintain. Famished from the MS, no stay sharp like my pen is. Nudnik in the rap game, respected. Boy, chick, don't act out like a schmendrick. Kosher cuts and the macha gets spoiled. Eminem style, 8 more, yo. With the naches, the stuff I enjoy. Don't nudge, I hate to be annoyed. Mom says stop schmoozing with the shiksas and goys. You need to get married, you're still unemployed. Mom says, niche the groitze metzir. Stop acting so weird, 2020 your year. Schmoozing for bringing the party. Who's in for bringing the party? Jewish, the